At my brother's graduation, my dad introduced me as the family mistake. The next day, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was supposed to be a proud day for all of us. The campus was buzzing with excitement, hundreds of families weaving through the courtyard with bouquets, cameras, and the kind of nervous energy that only milestones bring. My brother's cap and gown were a little too big, his tie was crooked, and his smile was as wide as I'd ever seen it. I was proud of him. Genuinely proud. I wasn't thinking about myself that morning. Not until it happened. We were standing near one of the white tents set up for refreshments, my father basking in the glow of my brother's success like he had been the one to write the essays, stay up all night studying, earn the degree. People were coming up to shake his hand, to congratulate the family. And then someone he knew walked over, an old colleague, maybe, or some distant family friend. I didn't catch the name because I was still smiling at my brother, still taking it all in. My father clasped the man's hand, grinning wide. "This is my son," he said, gripping my brother's shoulder proudly. Then his hand shifted toward me. "And this." He didn't hesitate. "This is our family mistake." The words weren't said in anger. They weren't whispered. They weren't even framed as a joke that had gone too far. He said them like they were fact. Like he was explaining who I was in the simplest way he knew how. The man laughed awkwardly, not sure if it was meant to be funny, not sure if he should play along. My brother's smile faltered, confusion flickering across his face. I just stood there. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what he meant. I just froze. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I'd been called names before. Teased. Compared. I'd felt like the lesser one more times than I could count, the one who wasn't as smart, as charming, as easy to show off. But hearing him say it out loud, to a stranger, in public, turned all those little cuts into something deeper. I laughed. I don't even know why I did it. A small, forced laugh, the kind you let out to make everyone else comfortable, even while your chest is burning. The conversation moved on, like it always does. My father started talking about my brother's future plans. The man nodded along. My brother stood awkwardly, pretending not to look at me. I smiled. I nodded. I even posed for photos, standing just far enough away from my father that we wouldn't have to touch. But inside, the words were still ringing. The family mistake. Not the one who struggled. Not the one who did things differently. The mistake. I'd heard a lot of things in my life. But never that. Not out loud. And the thing about words like that? They don't fade when the conversation moves on. They sit in your chest like a stone. Heavy. Unmovable. By the time the ceremony ended, my face hurt from smiling. My voice hurt from pretending. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream when I got home. I didn't call anyone to unload what had happened. I just sat there in my room, staring at the wall, and let the truth settle. Because what my father didn't understand was simple. When you call someone a mistake out loud, where the world can hear it, you don't get to control what happens next. And he was about to learn that the next day. Because his phone wouldn't stop ringing. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the graduation program still on my nightstand, the photos from earlier already sitting in my phone, and all I could hear was his voice. This is my son, and this is our family mistake. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the way he said them. Calm. Casual. Like introducing me that way wasn't cruel, it was accurate. Like that was all I was to him. A mistake. The word looped in my head, and with every repetition, it pulled other memories out of the dark. I remembered being 12 and overhearing him tell my aunt I was the difficult one. I remembered being 17 and him joking to his friends that I was the practice child, as if my life was just a warm-up before he raised my brother properly. I remembered the Thanksgiving where he said I was too sensitive when I cried after one of his biting comments. Back then, I told myself those things didn't matter. That he didn't mean them. That parents say careless things sometimes. But now, sitting in the dark, I realized something that made my stomach twist. He meant them. He had always meant them. I kept thinking about how he smiled when he said it yesterday. The kind of smile that wasn't cruel, just comfortable. Like this wasn't the first time he'd thought of me that way. Like maybe it wasn't even the first time he'd said it. Maybe it was just the first time I couldn't pretend he hadn't. I thought of my brother, standing there in his cap and gown, frozen for just a second when Dad said those words. The look in his eyes, not surprise, not even shock. Recognition. Like he had heard Dad call me that before. I turned my phone on and stared at the photos we'd taken after the ceremony. My brother's arm around me. Me smiling too wide. Dad standing next to us, the same expression on his face he always had when he was proud of my brother. But he'd never looked at me that way. Not once. By 3 a.m., the anger had crept in. Not the loud, shouting kind of anger, but the cold, steady kind that settles under your skin. The kind that doesn't burn out. I kept thinking about how many times I'd laughed off the things he said, just to keep the peace. How many times I'd swallowed hurt so my brother wouldn't feel awkward, so my mom wouldn't roll her eyes, so family dinners wouldn't turn into battlefields. I thought about all the holidays I showed up to, all the birthdays I helped plan, all the small things I did just to keep a connection, just to keep trying. For what? To be introduced as a mistake. By morning, the anger had sharpened into something else, clarity. Because here's the thing about calling someone a mistake out loud, in public, where people can hear it. It doesn't just hurt them. It leaves a mark on you. It sticks to you. And it spreads. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do about it yet. But I knew one thing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to protect him from the consequences of his own words. Because he'd chosen to call me the family mistake. And the world was about to hear it too. By the time the sun rose, my hurt had settled into something quieter and sharper. I didn't cry that morning. I didn't scream into a pillow or throw a glass at the wall. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, staring at my phone, and felt something click into place. I wasn't going to swallow it this time. For years, I had been the one to keep the peace. When he made his little jokes, I'd laugh weakly so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. When his comments cut too deep, I'd let them pass because that's just how he is. When he embarrassed me in front of family or friends, I'd tell myself not to ruin the moment by reacting. I had been the buffer. I'd been protecting him, from his own words, from the consequences of how he treated me. Not anymore. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the pictures from yesterday. My brother in his cap and gown, my parents smiling proudly beside him, the happy family image they wanted everyone to see. But that wasn't the real story. I stared at one photo in particular, one where I was standing next to my father. He had his hand on my brother's shoulder, but not on mine. I was smiling, but my eyes told the truth. I knew exactly what to do. I didn't write some long, bitter post. I didn't spill every wound and every story. I didn't need to. I chose one sentence. Yesterday, at my brother's graduation, my dad introduced me to someone as the family mistake. That was all. I posted it to my social media with that single line and the photo, the smiling, perfect graduation picture. I didn't add context. I didn't explain. Because I knew people would understand anyway. I knew they would read that one sentence and feel the sting of it. And I knew they would start asking questions. I didn't refresh the post obsessively. I didn't need to. The notifications began almost immediately. A high school friend commented, "Wait, what? Did he really say that?" An old neighbor sent me a private message, "I always wondered why you were treated differently." I'm so sorry. And then it started to spread. A cousin shared it. A coworker sent it to another. By lunchtime, people who hadn't spoken to me in years were messaging me, asking if it was true. I didn't have to say much back. I didn't need to beg anyone to be on my side. The words he said were doing the work for me. That night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, my Aunt Lydia, his older sister. She'd had her own falling out with him years ago, but she picked up on the first ring. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "I saw your post." I hesitated. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "Of course I called," she said. Her voice hardened. "He said that?" "Out loud?" "Yes." There was a long pause. Then she said something I hadn't heard anyone say yet. "That's not on you. That's on him." And in that moment, I felt the smallest bit lighter. Because I wasn't covering for him anymore. I wasn't protecting him from himself. I wasn't going to keep his words quiet. Because if he wanted to call me the family mistake, then the whole world was going to hear it. And he was going to feel what it was like when his words stopped being safe. By the next morning, my phone wasn't the only one buzzing. At first, I thought maybe only a few people had seen the post, a cousin here, a neighbor there. But by the time I made my coffee, it was everywhere. Someone had shared it. Then someone else. And someone else. What started as one quiet sentence, "Yesterday, at my brother's graduation, my dad introduced me to someone as the family mistake," was suddenly a thread unraveling, and every tug pulled more people into it. The ripple started close to home. Aunt Lydia called again, her voice sharp this time. "I knew your father could be cruel, but this," she said. "Does he realize how this makes him look?" She wasn't asking for me. She was asking for herself. Because now, the family name, the one he'd always been so proud of, was in the conversation too. Then came the messages from cousins, second cousins, people I barely remembered but who suddenly remembered me. "I saw what you wrote. I always wondered why you weren't treated the same." He really said that? In front of people? Some messages weren't kind. A few told me I was airing dirty laundry. But those were drowned out by the others. By the people who were furious on my behalf. By the people who decided to make calls of their own. By lunchtime, my brother called me. "Dad's mad," he said flatly. "Why?" "He says you twisted his words. He says you're making him look bad." I almost laughed. "I didn't twist anything," I said. "I wrote exactly what he said." My brother was quiet for a moment. Then, in a lower voice, he added, "Yeah. You did." There was something in his tone I hadn't heard before. Not pity. Not defense. Something closer to understanding. By mid-afternoon, the ripple had become a wave. Friends of my father's, the golf buddies, the co-workers, the neighbors he always bragged to, they'd seen the post. Some of them called him. Some of them called my mother. By evening, the messages had turned to questions. Did he really say that? Why would you call your own child that? People he admired were suddenly looking at him differently. The man who loved to tell everyone about his perfect family had finally said something even he couldn't smooth over. That night, I got a text from an old family friend I hadn't seen in years. "He's panicking. He's calling everyone, trying to explain. You hit a nerve." I set the phone down and stared out the window, the snow falling thick and heavy outside. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not exactly. It was something closer to justice. Because for years, his words had only hurt me. Quietly. Privately. But now? Now they were hurting him. Not because I twisted them. Not because I screamed or made a scene. But because I repeated them exactly as he said them and let the world hear. And the world was deciding for itself what kind of man he really was. By the next morning, his phone had turned into an alarm he couldn't shut off. It started early, before sunrise. The first calls were from family. His sister, Lydia, who rarely spoke to him, called 3 times before he finally picked up. "She told me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "She posted exactly what you said. Is it true?" I wasn't on the call, but I knew exactly how he would respond. The same tired line he always used when his words backfired. It was just a joke. But the thing about calling your own child the family mistake in public? No one laughs. By 9 a.m., the calls were coming faster. Cousins. Family friends. People from church. Each conversation was another spark on the pile. "Why would you say that? Did you really call her that? What kind of man introduces his daughter like that?" His voice was probably hoarse by noon, and still, the phone kept buzzing. Because it wasn't just family now. Neighbors called. Friends called. And then, his coworkers started. Someone from his office texted me later that day, someone I'd only met twice. "He's in damage control mode," the message read. "He's been in his office all morning, phone pressed to his ear, saying the same thing over and over. It's not what it sounds like." But it was what it sounded like. Because there's no way to soften the words, no way to twist the family mistake into something harmless. By noon, even his boss had called him. I knew because my brother texted me, amused and slightly horrified. Dad's boss asked him if it was true. He looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. I imagined him standing in his office, that proud, commanding tone gone, replaced with the voice of a man scrambling to explain himself. The man who had spent years in control, controlling the narrative, the dinners, the jokes, the way people saw him, couldn't control this. Because the words had come from his own mouth. And now, they were coming back to him. Ring after ring. By late afternoon, even my mother's voice had cracked under the strain. She called me, not to apologize, but to plead. "Can't you just delete it?" she said. "You've made your point. He's been on the phone all day." I thought about it for a moment. And then I said, no. Because the point hadn't been made. Not fully. He hadn't felt even a fraction of the humiliation he'd handed me with that single, careless introduction. I wasn't trying to destroy him. But I wasn't going to shield him either. Not this time. By evening, the phone still hadn't stopped. Every call another reminder that words aren't weightless. Every ring another echo of the sentence he thought would disappear the moment it left his mouth. "This is my son, and this is our family mistake." And now, he couldn't take it back. Not from me. Not from anyone. By the evening of that relentless day, I knew it was coming. My phone had stayed quiet most of the morning, quiet from him, at least. But after enough calls from relatives, after enough texts from his colleagues and friends, after enough shame piled on top of him, he finally dialed my number. I saw his name flash across the screen. For a moment, I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But because I wanted to hear it ring. I wanted him to know what it felt like to wait, to sit on the edge of something uncomfortable and have no control over when, or if, the other person would respond. On the fourth ring, I picked up. His voice was rough, like he'd been talking all day. "Hey." I didn't say anything at first. He cleared his throat. "I think we need to talk about this." "This?" I said flatly. "You know. What you posted. What you told people." "What I told people," I repeated, my voice calm, almost too calm. "You mean what you said?" He paused. I could hear him shifting on the other end, the sound of his chair creaking, the weight of his discomfort. "I didn't mean it like that," he said finally. There it was. The same line he'd been using his whole life. It was just a joke. It came out wrong. "I didn't mean it like that." I took a deep breath. "Dad, you called me the family mistake. You didn't whisper it. You didn't flinch. You said it like it was just true. He was quiet. I could almost hear the shame in the silence, the way it clung to him now that other people had heard the words too. You embarrassed me, he said suddenly, his voice sharp, defensive. You posted it where everyone could see. That was the moment I realized, even now, even after everything, he still thought I was protecting him. I didn't embarrass you, I said evenly. You embarrassed yourself. I just didn't cover for you this time. The line went quiet again. I pressed on. For years, I've been swallowing the things you say. Every joke. Every dig. Every time you made me feel like I wasn't enough. I've laughed, I've stayed quiet, I've made excuses for you. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. But not this time. Because this time, you called me a mistake out loud. And everyone heard it. And you don't get to decide that the world forgets it. There was a long pause on his end, and for the first time, I thought I heard his voice crack. I didn't think it would hurt you like that, he said, almost whispering. I closed my eyes. It did, I said simply. It hurt in ways you don't even understand. But here's the thing, it doesn't define me. It defines you. Another silence. This one heavier. Finally, he said, what do you want me to do? I thought about that. And then I told him the truth. I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to sit with it. The way I've had to sit with it. The way I sat with it last night. The way you made me sit with every other thing you've ever said. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize, not fully. But he didn't hang up either. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the silence wasn't mine to carry anymore. When we finally ended the call, I set the phone down and sat back in my chair. His phone would keep ringing. Maybe for days. Maybe for weeks. And every ring would remind him of the truth. He had called me the family mistake. But now, he was the one living with his own